Hello, and welcome to another episode of Esoteric Nation. In this episode, we're going to get really esoteric. In Christianity, there's the concept of loving your neighbor. But in order to do so, we must first get to know our neighbor, right? We must first understand a little bit about their background and their culture. So, for example, in our everyday lives, when we walk down the street, people are just strangers, right? They're just strangers on the street going about their day. From our perspective, we see them like cardboard boxes, like two-dimensional cardboard boxes that are just simply, walking in our periphery. But we don't really, wonder about what's going on inside their heads and their lives, and what their life experience is so far, either at that moment or in that period of their life. We just simply go about our own business. But in Christianity, there is this principle of loving your neighbor. But in order to begin to do that, we have to get to know our neighbor. We have to understand a little bit about them. So, for example, if you go to like the same coffee shop every day, you're gonna get to know whoever it is that is, serving you the coffee, and even the management that works there, right? And once you get past that initial stage of, bonding or getting to know them, this is where you develop compassion, right? And this is where the connection is established. So in order to know our neighbor, we have to get to know them. And once we get to know our neighbor, we are able to develop compassion and understanding. So, it is said that every person is like a galaxy, right? Every person lives in their own world. And, regardless of whatever spiritual background we may be engaged in at the moment, the concept is always the same, is to bring these worlds together, right? So let's enter into another galaxy and explore a little bit about these other worlds. So there are three key ideas that I would like to get across and present in this episode of Esoteric Nation. The first key idea, and actually the primary, is that of learning a new language introduces us to a new world. A good example of this is, let's say, literature. So if someone is reading, let's say, Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or any other fairy tale or fantasy genre of literature, the first thing that you encounter is what technically is called the lexicon. The words, the terms, the ideas, the worlds. And this is something that, fantasy writers are, not only good at, but they love, is creating these new worlds. So, for example, Tolkien, the author of the Lord of the Rings, created this whole new world and, this whole new set of terms and ideas and language, right? And that, language, that those new set of terms introduces us to a new world. And once you, enter into those worlds, you learn a little bit more about them. So if you're reading Lord of the Rings, the first chapter lays down the foundations, the point of departure, introduces the characters and introduces the plot, or at least within the first couple of chapters, right? And once that world is established, then in the, middle chapters of the book is when the new adventure begins, right? So this is, world development. So the first key idea is that in order for us to enter into a new world, we have to understand a new language. And this is, analogous both in literature and spirituality, right? New terms, new ideas, new languages, propels us into a new world. Now, the key idea there is finding the genre that is compatible to our state of mind, right? Finding a language that we find attractive and appealing. And fairy tale language is actually quite fascinating and captivating. And that's usually where people begin studying spirituality, is through fairy tale language. And once they are able to understand the deeper meaning of the fairy tale world, then they're able to begin to get the sense that, wow, these are the same things that you see across other sets of stories. So that is the primary key here that I want to present, is that of a new language. The second key point that I want to get across is, like I mentioned in the intro, is that in order for us to love our neighbor, we have to begin to understand them, right? And by getting to understand them and not seeing them just as like two-dimensional cardboard boxes, but actually at least understanding, what their dreams are, what they're passionate about, what they love, what they fear, by just simply beginning to understand a sort of very general overview of their lives, we begin to develop compassion, right? And that is how we begin to love our neighbor. So that's the second key idea. Now, the third main point that I want to make in this episode is that of comparative analysis. Once we go deep into any field, we begin to see that there is a bridge between these different genres, genres of either literature or spirituality. Now, this is usually what is fascinating to like the advanced scholars and academics. At the general level, for the general public, people don't usually catch onto that on its first encounter. But the third point is that by drawing a comparative analysis, we begin to see that we're not all so different after all. For us to understand a new world, we have to understand a new language. So the obvious example there is the language of computers, right? There are these people who specialize in computer programming, and in order to do so, they have to understand the language that computers speak in. You cannot just simply, type, into your computer the same way that you will, send an email, right? There's a very specific set of commands, computer commands that the computer understands. So in order to be able to operate, behind the scenes of technology, you have to understand computer language. And that introduces you into a whole new world, right? And this is why computer programmers, make pretty good money, is because, they really understand the language that is behind technology. And understanding a new language launches you into the deeper dimensions of that particular field, in this case, computers. So another area where language is really important is that of the legal system. For lawyers, lawyers have their own set of terms, their own language, their own lexicon that is used in law. And in order to effectively write contracts and communicate in that world, they have to understand the what is called the jargon, right? Once again, they cannot write out a contract the way that they will write an email to their spouse. They have to be very specific, and they have to use the proper terms, and they have to use the proper format. So now let's get into spiritual language. So in esoteric Islam, there are these two terms called the hikayat and the hakikat. A hikayat is basically a narrative, a story, an account, an imitation, or a drama. A good example is that of the poet Rumi, who is one of the most beloved poets in Sufi mysticism. And when you engage his poetry, it is really beautiful and captivating and enchanting. That is a hikayat, right? It is something that you engage that it points to something else, something deeper, something more profound, right? something more intuitive. If you read something that is spiritual, in this episode, we're looking at Sufi spirituality. But, there's other people that can get the same sense from reading Lord of the Rings or reading some of the, Western Hermetic philosophers or the other, classical spiritual traditions. As long as that connection is established, that's ultimately what matters, is that you're reading something at a superficial level, but something deeper is happening that is taking you deeper into the deeper meaning of what it is that you are reading, right? So in Islam philosophy, a hikayat is the term that is used for that process, you can say. We have all seen this or seen pictures of it where in Mecca, there is this thing called the Kaaba, and you see all the Muslims go around this cube. Now, that is also a hikayat. It is a story, it is a drama that is representing something higher, something from above. So it is you can say a reenactment, a story, a ritual that is connecting to something deeper, right? So the act of, going on that pilgrimage and, going around the cube, that is also a hikayat, right? So if a hikayat is a narrative, a story, an imitation, what is it that it is imitating? It is imitating a hakikat. So that is our second term that we're going to explore. So now we come into our second term, hakikat. So the hakikat is what the hikayat is pointing to. So a good example of this is, we go watch a movie, and obviously the movie is not real, right? It's actors. It's a drama that is being performed in film and captured. Now, in the event of a movie that is based on real life, what it is doing, it is imitating, it is mimicking a real life event. And there are plenty of movies out there that are based on real life. So the movie itself can be seen as a hikayat, the imitation, the drama. And the actual real life events can be seen as the hakikat, the true, the true events that actually occur. So that is a good way to get the sense of the difference between a hikayat and a hakikat. So, for example, when you read, let's say, Lord of the Rings, or when you read the beautiful poetry of Rumi, that is a hikayat, right? A story. One can also place a sacred text like the Bible and the Quran in that same category. You are reading or engaging these spiritual writings at a very sort of general level. But in order to acquire the deep significance behind these spiritual writings, one must apply what is called spiritual hermeneutics. And once you do that, you arrive to the hakika, right? The reality, the truth. The true meaning behind the text. So this can be seen as, reading between the lines, right? Reading in order to find the meaning behind the story, behind the narrative. So one can also see it as there's a story that is being told that you are following line by line, but there's also a story behind that when, they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So, once you have engaged the story in a very linear manner, the story beyond the story begins to be revealed. And this is when one says that, this is the esoteric world, the esoteric domain, the esoteric dimensions of these spiritual writings. So that is the hakika, the sort of the true meaning, the true reality, the higher world. So now our third term that we're going to become acquainted with is this Arabic term of tawil, which is the process of studying a sacred text in order to bring back the original meaning behind the sacred text. So for those who are students of the Quran, they are applying what is called tawil in Arabic, or in Western academic terms, it's called hermeneutics, which is kind of like a science of interpreting and bringing back the true meaning of what it is that one is reading. This is also the same technique that you use in trying to interpret the meaning of the Bible, right? You apply hermeneutics, or in Arabic, the tawil, in order to arrive to the deeper meaning of what it is that one is engaging. So this idea of spiritual hermeneutics is the true science, right? This is where it gets really challenging. Is this idea on how do we interpret sacred writings? Now, the first place that one starts, for anybody that is interested in spirituality, the first place that you begin is by finding someone who has been studying a particular spiritual tradition for 30 or 40 years. And in Sufi mysticism or esoteric Islam, the scholar that I rely upon to, get a better understanding of, Sufi or Islam mysticism is that by the author, scholar, philosopher, Henry Corbin, right? He is a French philosopher that wrote many books on Sufi mysticism, and he's one of the best sources to really unpack these ideas. The main key idea here is that by learning a new language, one is introduced to a new world, and it's just a matter of finding the right genre that one finds appealing, that brings one into these worlds, and opens our minds and our imagination. And, by understanding other genres of spirituality, we are able to, love our neighbor because we understand them a bit better. And through a process of comparative analysis, we begin to see that we're not all so different after all. And, although we may seem different at the surface level, at the exoteric level, at the deeper levels of reality, at the esoteric level, we're actually in the same world, in the same dimension, which is what I allude to with the idea of, esoteric nation, right? This is the world where we are, rooted into, that we come from different angles or different genres or different, backgrounds. So I hope this episode was informative, illuminating, and interesting and entertaining.